Thanks for joining us here on 9 News Plus. I'm Chris Bianchi, and 9 News on Tuesday night, May the 16th, hosted a mayoral debate between the two finalists for the runoff here between Mike Johnston and Kelly Brough, and they held that debate on Tuesday night here at the 9 News studios. And one of the three moderators, Kyle Clark, joins us now.
Hello, friends.
And back in the Bianchi box.
Yep.
And I guess one of the first things I want to ask you, Kyle, your overall top takeaways from that debate.
The top takeaways is that if you are a fan of kind of the status quo in Denver, kind of like the city as it's been run by the political establishment for the last couple of administrations, you are in very safe hands no matter which one of these two candidates wins. They're both centrist establishment types. They vary around the edges on some policies here and there. They don't vary widely on much. Both of them have kind of repackaged a lot of Mayor Hancock's policies in some new language, double down on this, less of this, that kind of thing. Neither of them would be a radical departure from the status quo. So if that's your jam, then you're in great shape. I mean, you don't want to say this, but you almost don't even have to vote, which I think is going to be an interesting question about turnout. Are people going to be enthused to vote about two candidates who, when it comes to views, don't differ a ton?
Were there any areas of separation or daylight that you were able to glean from them? Meaningful ones, maybe?
I think the temptation in a race like this, where the candidates have so many similar views, is to take small disagreements and magnify them into big ones because journalists are petty, controversy-seeking, and that kind of thing. No. They've got small differences here and there. Approach to homelessness, Mike Johnston wants to build the tiny home villages all over the place and then bring in some other housing, and Kelly Brough would take a more aggressive approach. She doesn't like to call them sweeps. She refers to it as forcible removal of encampments. I asked her last night to explain the difference. If anybody can explain the difference to me, I will buy you dinner. The difference between a sweep and a forcible removal of an encampment, but whatever. So she wants to be a little bit more aggressive than he does on that, but they both want to kind of get to the same place using a lot of the same steps. If you're looking at their overall political philosophies, how they view the world, he's progressive on some issues. Progressives don't consider Mike Johnston a progressive, but he has some progressive views here and there. She does not particularly. She's kind of a very, inside the Democratic Party, she'd be like center right. In politics writ large, she's center left. But I don't want to get in there and say, well, they disagree about this and it's the end of the world, because none of it is.
Well, I guess one question heading in, and you kind of just alluded to this a second ago.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be interesting because there's so much potential progressive vote out there. No progressive made the runoff here, the final two. Even if policy-wise there weren't any big lurches to the left, was there language or vocabulary you used to try and lure some of those left-her voters?
That's a very smart question to ask, and that's something that I've been listening to, because think about it now. Kelly Brough just squeaked into that runoff. Lisa Calderon finished third with virtually no money in her campaign. Brough was the best funded candidate, or she and Johnston were the two best funded candidates. So, I mean, there is a sizable interest in a progressive candidate out there, not enough to land one in the runoff. Johnston had some soft appeals in that direction. Brough, actually, one of her harder lines against Johnston last night was tying him to the two progressive women of color who didn't make the runoff, Leslie Herod, Lisa Calderon, saying that those women want to defund police and they endorse you. Of course, let's be honest, tying that to Mike Johnston is just utter nonsense, because Mike Johnston doesn't want to endorse the police, doesn't want to defund the police. It's actually questionable how much Leslie Herod wants to defund the police. I mean, she wants more spending on some other alternative programs. Lisa Calderon takes a harder stance on that, but it was kind of a silly political attack, and it showed that Kelly Brough has completely written off any progressive votes. If basically she's name-checking the two progressive women who didn't make the runoff in a derogatory way. I think that if there's any outreach to the progressive community from the Brough side, it's her "I'm a woman, vote for me" thing.
Yeah, and she leaned into that a few times, I believe, right?
What's that?
I think she leaned into that a few times.
She did. Her new ad closes with it. She likes to say, well, I'm not telling anybody to vote for me because I'm a woman. I'm just saying that the best man for the job is a woman. That's her line. It's a good line. It's a really good line. And what we brought up is yesterday, or 2 days ago, Lisa Calderon endorsed Mike Johnston. And when she did so, we asked her, you lead a group that is about electing Democratic women, but you're not endorsing the Democratic woman. And she said, yeah, because just the woman card is not enough for me to overcome all the differences in our values. And she said, Kelly Brough doesn't share any of my values. So she endorsed Mike Johnston. So I think that will be kind of like the nominal nod that Brough might give to progressives, which is you can make history by electing Denver's first woman mayor. Johnston, some mild overtures to progressives. My assessment is progressives who are informed about politics know that Mike Johnston is the slightly more progressive of the two, so he doesn't have to woo them.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it might only do him damage with people in the center to center right.
I guess one question for you based off of this. Turnout in the first round was about 39%, about 175,000 people turned out. What's your guess? Does that go up or does that go down for the June 6th final?
I don't know. So typically, Denver's runoffs are an anomaly versus runoffs in other races around the country, like Senate runoffs and things like that, where typically our turnout will go up for the runoff. That's when people really start paying attention. I feel confident saying that the increase in the vote for this year's runoff will not be as significant as it has been in previous years. Will the number of votes actually go down? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure. But I don't think that there will be as much difference. And here's the reason why I say it, okay? Why do people vote? All right? Number one reason. This I'm going to get kicked off the 90s Plus for saying this. Number one reason. Because they're old.
Older? Yep.
Old people vote. Old adjacent people vote. All right? Now, we're nerds. We vote every time. But a lot of people our age do not vote. People younger than us do not regularly vote. So older people regularly vote. And then think about why people vote. You vote because you love somebody or their ideas, and you vote because you fear somebody and their ideas. Are there people who love Kelly Brough and Mike Johnston? Yeah, some, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's like a beat down the door kind of movement thing. But here's the real deal. Fear. There are people on the right end of the political spectrum that fear both of those Democrats. There are people on the progressive left who fear both of them because they're corporate types. But who fears one and not the other? Because there's your impetus to vote, right?
Yep.
Right? Even if I'm agnostic about Kelly Brough, if I fear Mike Johnston, I might be motivated to vote, or vice versa. Who fears one of them and not the other? They're so close together on most everything. I just don't think that anybody's going to be motivated to vote out of apprehension about one of them.
So I guess when it goes back to the debate here, and again, I'm trying to set the stage a little broadly because based on what you've said, they're pretty in line on most issues.
Yeah.
Does the status quo from let's call the debate? I'll maybe take your words for it here. A bit of a status quo.
Yeah. Status quo, establishment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Does that favor, in your opinion, does that make Johnston or does that make Brough more of a favorite heading into June 6th?
I mean, they're two faces on the Mount Rushmore of political status quo in Denver. I mean, Kelly Brough is maybe a little bit more ensconced in it just because she's been very heavily involved in city politics for a long time, whereas Johnston's been involved in more state politics. But they really are two sides of the same coin. We were talking about this last night with Marshall Zellinger, and I mean, listen, people make choices like this all the time between two things with a slight difference. You know what I mean? You go into the freezer aisle and you can get vanilla ice cream or French vanilla ice cream, and you're presented with that choice. And Denver voters are presented with a choice. Would you like vanilla or would you like French vanilla? And some people may just be like, I'm not a big vanilla ice cream person, and some people may be really passionate about one of the two.
Was there anything on Tuesday night that you didn't expect? Was there any sort of maybe a lack of policy disagreement that caught you off guard?
I would say in terms of things that surprised me, it was interesting. Kelly Brough and I had a conversation about some of the fairly conservative stances that the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce advocated for when she was leading that organization. And we took a couple of issues where we were able to say, all right, so you were here on this issue, and Denver voters were here because they were ballot measures that people voted on. So like oil and gas setbacks, Brough opposed them. Denverites, like 2-1, voted for them. Paid family leave, Brough and the Chamber of Commerce opposed that ballot measure. Denverites overwhelmingly voted for it. Progressive income tax to fund education, which failed. Brough opposed it. Denverites overwhelmingly voted for it. So just kind of said, like, are you out of step with where Denver is? And she said, well, not everything that I said and advocated for at the Chamber of Commerce was stuff that I personally believed.
Interesting.
Okay. So now this gets kind of complicated. Like, you can understand where she's coming from. Like, that's a fair thing to say.
Right.
Like, I was paid to do a job, and that's what it was. But now it becomes like this mystery grab bag of positions where I literally had to go like, okay, so oil and gas, you publicly fought setbacks. What did you privately think? Paid family leave, all these things. And so now voters and journalists have to start going through all of these, positions that she's taken, which are at odds with the majority of Denver voters, and be like, but what did you really secretly think while you were taking this position? And it's an odd dynamic that doesn't happen in a lot of different races. And then obviously the larger overarching question is like, did she agree with the majority of the chamber's positions? And if she didn't, why was she doing it? Like, where's the value set there? So I don't know. I think it's an interesting conversation. That was one of the things I found most interesting last night. And they are edging further and further into the DPS situation, the school situation. Neither one of them is interested in a takeover of the school governance, which would require legislative approval. But they are getting more and more bold about what they're saying. They want SROs in schools if school principals want them. They're willing to pay for them at the city level if the district is unwilling to pay for them. Both of them last night, I believe, said for the first time that they want pressure on the school board to change the discipline matrix, which allows kids accused of violent crime up to including attempted murder to come back to class. And both of them said there's got to be better options for potentially violent kids than just tossing them back in classrooms.
We can both offer every kid a free and appropriate public education and not say that a kid who's been expelled from another school for a gun charge ought to be in a 3,000 student comprehensive high school where we have teachers every day trying to pat them down for a gun to make sure that they're safe.
I think we can do both of those things and have kids who are at high risk, both for their own protection, but also other kids, to be in a safer location or in another school or learning in a different manner until they're stabilized or doing better or deemed to not be at risk to other kids.
So they're getting very vocal on that. They've talked about, well, we want to be more involved in school board races. Well, that's pretty nebulous. Let's have a conversation about that. School board vice president Ayante Anderson led the fight to get SROs out of schools. Do you want to see him replaced and not reelected in November? And both of them said yes. Mm-hmm. And Brough said that she actually wants all three incumbent board members who are up for reelection defeated, and she's going to support other people. So they're getting a lot more clear at our prodding about the change they want to see in DPS.
That's interesting.
But they agree. Again, they agreed. They agree. But that still though is instructive for voters, because if they agree on something, then guess what? That's the policy of the new mayor of Denver, Colorado. We know it today. You don't even have to wait for the day after election day. We know it today. We know what the new policy is going to be because they agree.
Well, any final takeaways for voters out there who this week probably getting their ballots, or next week, as a lot of them start to make up their minds?
I think a really interesting thing to watch is whether the lack of a progressive candidate in the mayor's race dooms the progressives running for city council.
Interesting. So
yeah, that's your Candy Cidabaka. That is your Chantel Lewis. That's your Shen Hoffman. Are they in trouble because there is not a Lisa Calderon or a Leslie Herod in the runoff that will incentivize progressives to come out?
And by the way, sorry, final thing to that.
Yeah.
Lisa Calderon's endorsement hours before the debate was, I think, tepid, safe to say?
Oh, yeah. No, it was room temperature, for sure. I mean, she's been very pointed about how she doesn't believe that either of these, she'll describe them as like corporatist, anti-worker, that's her language, candidates, these two. So we thought maybe she wasn't going to endorse either of them, but a lot of her supporters are like, come on, tell us who's better. She referred to endorsing Mike Johnston, which she did, as a harm reduction strategy. Yikes. You know what I mean? Like, here's the deal with Lisa Calderon. Whether you like or dislike her politics, Lisa Calderon suffers from uncontrolled honesty. She appears to be incapable of BSing about stuff, or that make-believe, happy-slappy, back-patting political stuff where somebody endorses somebody else that just beat him in a race, and he's the greatest guy, she's the greatest woman, or whatever. Lisa Calderon, that's not her lane. That's not what she does. So she explained why she thinks that both of the candidates are terrible, but she thinks that Johnston is less terrible, so she's going to endorse him.
Yay.
I mean, if the Johnston team puts that up on the website or on a sign or something, they're just going to have to say Calderon endorses Johnston, because I don't think there's a single quote that they could pull that is any good. It was the most tepid political endorsement I think I had ever seen.
So it'd be like going to a Nuggets game and just wearing, I don't know, like a white T-shirt or something.
Something, like I'm attending, but I'm not really enthused about participating. We'll see if voters are into this. I mean, I will say, I think that there's a good chance. Most people think Johnston's the front runner, right? He won the first round pretty convincingly. He's very well funded. And I mean, the Brough team says that they're the underdog, and I don't think that they're exaggerating. I think that they think that that's true. But if nobody cares and turnout drops, and a decent number of people believe they're roughly the same and are like, I see value in electing the first woman mayor of Denver, well, that could be really interesting for Kelly Brough. So, we shall see. Oh, one more thing that I'm watching. Do the people who spent big to get them into the runoff continue to spend big to get them elected? Right? Because, again, why do people donate big money to a candidate, or more importantly here, to the outside group supporting them? Because you love or fear, right? Okay? And I think they both got some love money, in that first round. There's out-of-state liberals that love Mike Johnston a ton. There's developers and real estate people who love Kelly Brough a ton and got them both to this point. But if you're a developer in town, is Kelly Brough so much more valuable to you than Mike Johnston that you're going to spend a boatload of money?
Interesting.
I don't know. I mean, Mike Johnston's friendly to developers. Like, I think that Johnston's money, the out-of-state money that loves him because he's this big idea guy, that kind of thing, I think his outside money might be more durable than hers. Because I just don't know that the developers and the builders and the real estate people fear Mike Johnston, even if they love Kelly Brough.
Is it too early to get a sense for that?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
we
it
will
is.
find out.
We'll keep watching it because they're just back up on TV with ads here within the last couple of days, so it's still too early to see on that. And who knows? I mean, I'm wrong a lot. So maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I'm wrong about the fact that people won't be enthused about the election. Maybe people feel very passionately about, do you want the vanilla with the little flecks in it, the little black flecks, or do you want the French vanilla? Some people feel very passionately about their ice cream or their candidates.
It's almost as if predicting the future is difficult.
Hard to do.
Yeah, it's hard to do.
Yeah, I can't imagine if you had to predict stuff that happens in the sky.
Yeah.
That would be really hard.
Hypothetical.
I just talk about people.
You just talk about people, but Kyle, thanks so much for joining us here on 90s Plus. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.